Signs.
The
Oh,
sign
you
up.
have to come in.
Okay, you're good,
We're
Francine.
Okay, it is September 13th and 2023. It's gonna be 5:35 and the meeting of the library, public library advisory board. So let's see, let me get my agenda out. First of all, did people have a chance to look at the minutes?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make, maybe add an item to the discussion items on the agenda.
Okay, let's do the minutes first.
I want
and
to do
then
that
we'll-
first, okay?
Okay. On that,
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second,
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's see. I think there's the agenda right on top. No wonder I can't find it. Okay, so, was there any public comment submitted?
No public
No
comment.
public comment? Okay, and now we have on our agenda information items and, we have an update from TAP.
So tonight I don't have early time for school and people were busy, so we don't have any tab members. But with Clarissa's help, I'm going to share with you a report from our 2 high school interns who recently wrapped up their internships and left you some reflections so you can learn more about how that experience went for them. Yeah.
Okay, just slideshow.
And you may have to click on each of the videos.
Oops.
Internship was just a broader. I think the biggest thing that I gained from this internship was just a broader understanding about the variety of things that happen every single day at the library. Beyond just like the big programs that like people have to plan for in advance, so that there's somebody there who knows exactly what's going on. And then like all of the setup and keeping everybody coordinated so that events can even happen at all effectively. But also just like the day-to-day like shelving and making sure that books that get left out get back onto the shelves and then they get back onto the shelves in the right places. Because otherwise they just disappear and it's impossible practically to ever find them again. I think the biggest thing that
You have access to your phone.
You can, the next one is all over as well.
one of the really cool things that I got to do because of this internship was job shadow with circulation, which was so insightful and like very fascinating to see how much they've done to make their system so much more efficient in getting books returned to the library and how they sort them all out and then getting them back to their
This is, you haven't gone through this one, right? 6?
Right.
Okay.
The project I got to complete as part of this internship is a display in the teen scene windows. It explores different themes of identity through 3 different questions that I spent a lot of time crafting. The first question, what fuels or inspires you? Asks people to reflect on like their internal selves and who they feel they are. The second question, how do you want to make an impact? Asks people to more explore their external selves and where they fit into the rest of the world. And the final question, what do you want to know about others is more a question about what you value in other people and how that impacts you. Like, what do you think is important to know about other people? The project I got to complete as part
All those are good questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and see if it allows me to.
Yeah.
You wanna come back to it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Move forward and then we'll come back and share Catherine's stuff.
Okay, so, this wrote to the chair's report now. This will be my last meeting as chair. And, I can tell you that I feel like, they say it takes a village. Well, obviously, we have been a village. We have all, David and Lois and I have really worked closely together. And we've been supported by you all, being patient with my clumsy handling of running meetings. So thank you all very much for that. During the past month, had opportunity with Lois and David was invited, but due to a conflict wasn't able to meet with a meeting with Scott Archer, who is the deputy city manager for community services. I know I've repeatedly explained over the past year, Mayor Coy has reorganized city government and created this category. And this Scott Archer was hired into this position. And I was actually involved in in the interviews for this position, and can say that it was clear that he was going to just hit the ground running, and he knew Oregon, he knew libraries. All the candidates were strong in parks. So, and parks is a big part of community services. So he was happy to meet with us. He agreed with inviting lab involvement in planning for future library sites and services, which we all know is part of our bylaws that we're supposed to advise council. The background is Lois served with 2 city councilors on the renovation subcommittee before this renovation of this library was done. So there's a history of involvement in of lab in construction. And the other thing is the fund distribution for this starts in fiscal year 2028 and runs till fiscal year 2032 with a stepwise increase in the amounts dispersed every year, from a low of 0.5 or $500,000 the first couple of years to a high of up to $2.5 million the last couple of years. So since both she and I are turned off lab by then, we're hoping that, by informing you all of that this doesn't really become, the funds for this doesn't really start disbursement for another few years, that you'll keep that on your radar. And he was really, he felt, well, of course lab will be involved in that. So no argument there, and a lot of support for that. He also agreed for the not yet posted position of city librarian. Bridget is serving as deputy city librarian after the resignation of Kim Carroll, who left in May. This position has not been posted yet. There's a history of our involvement in interviews for that position, and he agreed to include lab when that position is posted and interviews occur. He also expressed on his own, without having to be nudged, and I thought this was nice, coming to a lab meeting. So, and personally, I think a good my recommendation from where time for that might be more like early 2024, say after we find out what happens in the with the employee payroll tax, because that's going to be so I that would be just my suggestion, but I just wanted to explain why. He also explained, I said, what impact will it have if the payroll tax fails? Will there be an impact on the current fiscal year, which is because the payroll tax would have become into the city's budget in the next fiscal year, which begins next July. And basically, he said everything's on the table. And he said it's a key time for lab. He was at when I did the presentation to City Council with Lois looking over my back. She had my back. He was there, and he said these kinds of things are really good, both as citizens and also as public officials, as we are, that we articulate to council what's important. So with that, he's not the decision maker. City council is going to be the decision maker on what's going to happen with budget. And I think that he was very excited about something that I one time got when I went to a library and kind of run around to a lot of different Salem area libraries. On my printed receipt, it said you saved, and it said how much money by taking out these materials. He thought that would be have traction with council, and I think it will with the public as well. So to that end, I've asked Clarissa to put up on the I Love Libraries website the categories that are that are looked at for factoring out the value of materials. And there's a lot of detail, and I've sent an email to Bridget regarding, can we get this data from somebody? How can we get more specifics than just how many things were checked out? Because you have to go to where it says what libraries do, what's your library worth, right there. Okay, and scroll down. So it actually gives value. So for adult books, for example, it's $17 per book. For youth books, it's I think 12. And then for children's books, it's 17 again. And each of these have a value, a dollar value attached. So if we knew, now just put like why don't you put in one for just adult books borrowed, just so you could show. Yeah. See, so you put in an N and you get it in. And I think that using this tool and giving that data to city council will be powerful. And I'm on it. I mean, I won't be chair anymore, but this is something I'm passionate about. And it really resonated I felt with him as far as important information to convey to people who are going to make decisions. The other thing that he felt was a presentation from TAB would be of great interest to city council. And as follow-up, Sonia has agreed to discuss this with TAB. And I feel that because about a year and a half ago, Norm Wright told us that 80% of the library's budget is connected to staff expenses like salaries and benefits. So because of that, to me, it's critical for city council to hear how staff involvement has enabled TAB, for example, to be able to do all these marvelous programs that they've been able to put on, which are so critical for youth and engagement and the futures of these people as engaged citizens. So I'm hoping that that'll be embedded in what's said, the importance of staff to the success of TAB's programs. So, okay, well, I want to stop now. Worn out, but I'm excited about that meeting with him. And do you want to add anything, Lois?
No, I think yeah, you covered it all. He was very approachable. And he seemed excited about the library. And yeah, he pretty much was okay with all the things we wanted to do, like, you know, sit in on the hiring things and all that. So that's great.
Okay, Bridget, hi.
Hi, so I did, you should have received the city librarian's report and there's some wonderful information there about all the upcoming programs that we're looking forward to, any strategic plan updates. If you have any questions regarding any of the information in there, please let me know.
So this is kind of for both. So what you're saying, Francine, is like, we could take this number of physical items checked out and maybe run some numbers, like how many were children, blah, 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 and then say, like, this month, we save the community X amount of dollars. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and
Okay.
also it's actually, if you, on the I Love Libraries website, if you look further, you'll see there's even how much per hour they consider for computer use. So it's not just how many people use, 40 by whatever, but it's like, it's powerful. And yeah, that tool will really, I think, yeah, that's my point, to try to get as much data on this and as is available.
Is that gonna be hard?
So that was one thing I want to just bring to the board, that I did receive your email, Francine, and I was inquiring to Karen, who is our circulation supervisor, as well as our staff person at CCRLS, the umbrella that we're under, to see if the report system that we currently have can, if we can have like a monthly report to have these specific stats. Because if staff were themselves to look at all of those stats that you wanted, it would take up pretty much a whole day or more, because there's so much things that we would have to do, so minute. Usually we do that for the annual report for Oregon libraries, which we do, currently now our staff members compiling that, and it's not due till November. So as you can see, it takes months to compile a lot of that minute detail. So I'm working with our CCRLS partners and our circulation supervisor to see if those stats are something that we can produce each month. And it might not be, but we can try to.
I think if we could just get it for one,
Yeah.
if we could just do a one-time thing to, because I don't expect, well, you all will need to make this decision, but personally, I kind of think if we make the point and we can even reuse the same month, I would say, like last August, let's remind you that last August, we have this data just to make it less burdensome.
And I do have stats of the average daily use. That was, I think I exported that on where I can give you an average stats of how much the meeting rooms are used, how the average of how much attendance we have to programs, checkouts and all of that. I can give you averages and we can plug that in so you can see how much that is each month.
So, I guess the next step would be, is there anybody among us that, might want to partner with me or just take this on or whatever to, you know, so, I mean, I want to give people an opportunity to, you know, engage with this but I'm also not trying to pressure anybody, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's like, okay, great. If you change your mind. You know, it's funny how, when I was on this thing with work where I said, okay, so now everybody's looking at the ceiling. That's okay. So it's a ceiling question, but that's okay, you know, I'm okay with that, but I wanted to offer it, extend it so that, you know, so that you would all know that it's not just like one person thing.
And Bridget, would it be possible to sort of put this through from last year's report, just put in the data and say this is what the total was for the year?
Yeah, and that's, I can forward you the link to see what last year's, what our average is. You'll just see everything like that one.
Because we could give them a year.
Yeah.
From the day of the already collected.
So we'll just, would it be okay if I just follow up with you, like maybe you reach out to me when you think,
For those specific steps.
or for even for the data that you already have?
Yeah, I can forward that on to the group.
Okay,
Well, when last year's numbers have COVID.
oh, yeah, that's,
Last
thank you.
fiscal year.
So we had to have a little asterisk.
Yeah.
It still will be impressive.
Yeah.
I think it's for 21-22. So from like June 2021 to June 2022.
Yeah, that
What
would,
do you
that
think
would
they're
not
not will have an impact?
Yeah.
So should we wait until
Let's wait till
the November one, the next one that comes out?
Those won't be published till probably spring of 2024.
Okay,
So it might be too late.
well, maybe we can discuss individually, like how we can best present things, and I think timeliness is important personally, that council needs to get something that they can make them sit up straight, especially my feeling is when we're looking at what's been put into the airport and the resources for that, the rationale being that Salem is going to be a star city. It's going to be, so to me, libraries are part of that. And I think to me, articulating that connection is important from my point of view. Okay. Is there more?
Any other questions you guys have about the program?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, actually, and I was gonna do it later, but I guess I can do it in your report. Has there been ever a discussion about putting an old coffee shop or thing and is there a history of having one before, or, you know?
So before the remodel, I believe Antonio knows more about this. We had a little coffee shop here where that collaborative studio was. And I think that vendor left on their own accord or what?
Yeah. Well, there were a number of vendors in that space over the years. Juan's, actually, Juan's was over at City Hall. Amadeus Cafe that was downtown started here. And then we had a bakery, Phoenix Park Bakery for a number of years. And then one of the people that worked for her took over that space and operated it. And then the last one about 2018 was finding it was just not possible to make enough money to justify continuing.
And, has there been any, I'm just wondering, just the increase in foot traffic here.
So foot traffic was higher at that time,
Okay.
pre-pandemic, and And yeah, the location was challenging for all of those operators to try to profit in it. You know, as costs change and things shift, that final operator just found that it was wasn't gonna make enough money, and I think at that point, the decision was made not to fill the space with another food vendor, because each of those vendors had kind of reported some of that, some of those changes.
One of the things I have been working on, because it's also a goal for the city to utilize the space more, the Peace Plaza. So one of the things I'm working with the parks person is to get food trucks, just kind of like a quarterly basis to kind of have a different option there. And so we're still working on that. That's kind of right now been placed on the back burner. But we are exploring that option once the food truck Friday leaves the riverfront, maybe having a possibility of having it here, because we all want to utilize that space. It's great, especially for both city staff and patrons to have something closer and accessible for me. So that is something hopefully. That's very simple.
Good question. Okay, so friends of the library. Some of the library report. No, we did not hear back. I sent them an email and I did not hear back from them, but it's Sandra is out about their book sale and they're looking for volunteers and so want to be able to go home with that. And do we have a report from the foundation? Well,
I'm not a member yet.
you were like, but weren't you going to be able to go?
No, because they said I'd have to wait
Until the election.
it was official.
All right. All right, so you want to talk at all about the foundation, like the 3 boards and all?
And David, you can chime in. We did have a brief meeting with the foundation. Kate, who is the executive director, Kate Van Boomsen, and who was the other guy? James McGovern. That's right.
Their chair.
Who used to be one of the chairs of the foundation. So we wanted to get together to talk about just kind of ways that we can collaborate. And we wanted the friends, somebody from the friends to be there too, but I guess right now they're really kind of struggling to just keep afloat, I guess. So they didn't send anybody. But I thought it was a good meeting. We did it on Zoom. And the foundations seem to be ready and willing to collaborate in different ways. And we've been talking, I've been on this board for 7 years, and we've been talking for 7 years about getting all the support boards together. And I think it's gonna happen.
We have a date. So
We have a date. December 6th, here at the library in the Anderson room. At what time? Was it 7? I don't, look, David, do you remember?
I thought it was fine.
Okay, 5 to 7.
And
And this-
Sonia was part of that meeting too. Right? Sonia was.
Oh, yeah,
too.
Sonia.
Yeah.
Sonia, I'm sorry. Yes, Sonia was a big part of the meeting. So this meeting will, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's gonna be kind of a meet and greet, because we don't know them, they don't know us. And really just talk about ways we can help each other, and also like basically advocate for the library. Not in any elections or anything like that, just ways we can support our library. And get it before the city council, like all the things we do, and collaborate with each other on maybe ways to get more funding, events we might want to do. And so we have that date, and then are we still keeping that date October 6th?
I think it's for planning. I think the
That's
goal,
for planning.
yeah, I think that just as a follow-up, I think the goal was we want to get all the boards together just to meet each other.
Yeah.
And find out what we do. And, while we're involved, and it is a meet and greet, but it's an opportunity for all of us just to kind of know each other and find out what each of the boards do and what their priorities are, and then as she said, build upon that to see how we can work together on those things that we can work together on, and work separately on those things that we work separately on as well.
So we're gonna plan that, and we might end up having to use some of our funds, but we would have to come to the board, of course, if necessary, if we have any kind of a facilitator, or we want to refresh, whatever. But I think we should have refreshments. We're always having. That's like, that gets people there.
I second that.
Yes. So yeah, I think it looks great. So put it on your calendar.
So you wanted to, add an item.
I added it. I just added
That
it.
was it.
That was it.
That was it.
Yeah, easy peasy.
All right, okay. So, okay, I guess, Mark, thank you for being here and keeping us safe and out of trouble. Yeah.
Present from over here, so. And is that,
Is that are you on the PowerPoint first? Okay, let me just,
Mark, are you going to talk about the changes that were just put forth by the legislature, or are you going to just do an overview?
changes on,
That came out, I guess I was reading in the Oregonian, that I guess the legislature kind of further defined some of the requirements around public news.
if you want to get into that, talk a little bit about it, but it's more. Oregon Government Ethics Commission oversight of what's already existing in the law.
Okay.
And so, not really relevant to this presentation, it's just sort of avenue that there's plain.
I see. Okay.
Authority. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about public meetings, public records, and ethics for government officials. We're going to start, first topic is going to be public meetings law. By the way, my name is Mark Weinstein. I'm an assistant city attorney here. I've been with the city for about 9 years. Was advisor to the lab previously. Changes in my office. Back to being the advisor to the lab, so I'm fairly familiar with the work that you do. This is the policy statement for public meetings. It's codified in ORS chapter 192. And what we see from that policy is that it's the purpose of the public meetings law to ensure that the meetings of governing bodies are in which decisions about the public's business are made and discussed in the open forum accessible to the public, that the public has notice of the hearing of the meetings, that they have an opportunity to be present, to be informed, and that the meeting is accessible to all. So who's subject to the public meetings law? It applies to all meetings of a governing body, of a public body for which a quorum is required in order to make the decision or to deliberate for the decision. So even if you're not actually making a decision, but there's going to be deliberation and an information exchange, that has to be a public, that's considered a public meeting and has to have notice, etc. So you need to be careful about what you're doing, even if you think it's informal, if you're discussing information that goes toward a matter for which this body is going to make a decision. If you have a quorum there, you in essence created a public meeting.
Mark, is there an example of a situation where we have a quorum where it wouldn't be considered a public meeting?
You'd have a quorum and it wouldn't be a public meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, social gatherings, purely social. You're not discussing. Quorum relates to your business of the board and you're discussing it. So if you're all getting together to just do things that have nothing to do with the business of the lab, or exchange of information that has nothing to do with the business of the lab, just friends, you want to get together in a social setting, then that is not a public meeting, although there might have been enough of you present had it been about the lab's business, you'd have a forum. So one area where stuff like this runs, it gets tricky is things like retreats, where you're setting agendas and directions and policies of the lab, which are then going to be factored into decisions and recommendations you make. Those quickly become public meetings, and our recommendation is always, notice those and be in a position to have the public attend or to televise it, or however you wish to do it. Just coming back to this, public body is a city or county or any other subdivision. It means 2 or more members of the public body that have authority to make decisions or recommendations. So even though you don't have authority to direct the work of the library, you have authority to make recommendations and advice to the city council or to staff. When you're acting as the lab, you are the governing body and an extension of the city. Put off your private citizen hat, and you are a public official and a governing body of the city of Salem. You're representatives of the city of Salem when you're on this board and commission. So it includes all of our boards and commissions, not just the lab. So some of you have served on other boards and commissions. In that, you're all of the public meeting laws, public records laws, government ethics apply. So what meetings are subject to the law? It's whenever we were just talking about this, whenever quorum is required in order to make a decision or to deliberate toward a matter. So again, the easy division is if just purely a social gathering and you're not talking about the lab business, that is not a public meeting. But again, real quickly, if you're coming together as a group and you have a forum there, and then you start talking about, let's talk about where we want to, what recommendations we should make for resources for the library or things like that, or, you're all together and you're talking about, hey, remember what the last meeting we had this? I really feel we should get together and do this. And there's a forum of you there. And that's a discussion that's going to carry forward toward an ultimate decision. That becomes a public meeting. So if it's just what do we do? Like, what is the function of the lab? Probably not a public meeting. If it's a exchange of ideas that are then going to be subsequently used in deliberations and policy recommendations, even if you think you're in a real casual social environment, you can quickly turn that into being a public meeting.
So when in doubt.
Consider it a meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Notice it.
what is required as far as notice of the meeting? Just on the city website?
There are legal requirements. That's more of a discussion for me to do. Staff handles that, but it has to be, we publicly notice it on the website. If anyone has expressed an interest in knowing of, we have certain people that request for certain boards and commissions that they receive all notices. Anyone who's expressed receiving notice has to receive it. And what is in the meeting, how far out in advance of time it happens, those are all sort of things that are specified in law. That's part of the reason why the city staff handles taking care of the publication of those, the agenda packet and the agenda is because of the notices that are required. You have to, it's not just where the notice goes, the content of the notice, the timing of the notice. Basically, it has to reasonably inform the public of where the notice is, what's going to be on the agenda, and opportunities and how they can be present, and done in a manner reasonably likely to inform people that wanted to attend that, or people we know want to attend.
Would we, I mean, is the standard such that if we had a public meeting, would we be required to take, would we be required, for example, put on YouTube, and would we be required to take minutes of that meeting?
So the city has its own policies regarding public meetings, and I don't know what the right. I think think it's an internal city policy that's requiring all of its public meetings to be recorded and accessible to the public. I don't know specifically statutorily what's required in there or not, but it's the city's policy. Remember, this is a board of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it has to follow the city's policies and procedures. Right now, we just moved away. There was a period of time where all of the city boards moved to it being remote through Zoom. And it didn't matter if an individual board wanted to meet in person, then it became a hybrid, and now it's, how does that particular board want to do it? But it is a city policy that all of these are being recorded and televised. I don't think that's a public meetings law requirement, but it's a city policy to promote accessibility considering the climate of what's going on. But it is a requirement that these meetings be open to the public, that the public know where the meeting is going to happen if they want to attend in person, or giving them the Zoom option or to attend that way.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out logistically, because it was one of the issues that came up with our discussion with our joint meeting with the other two boards. We recognize that we had to make it public, and that's fine, we can do that. But is there, I guess, maybe the second question for staff as well, do we have to, have it over YouTube? Do we have to make sure that minutes are available and accessible to the public for something that's more of a meet and greet where we may have some discussions? And that's kind of, I know we're getting into a little bit of a gray area, and that may be
The
another
safest way to
conversation.
do it is treat it like a public meeting. You're not gonna run afoul of the public meetings law, treat it like a public meeting. So if you're noticing it and you're inviting the public to be present during the meeting and greet discussion, have your agenda, give a notice, do it, record it, however you wish to do it. If you're concerned that there's going to be discussion that would constitute a public meeting. So that would be my recommendation. You're being overly cautious, you're never going to run afoul of this. You're only going to run afoul of it if you go in the other direction.
So if two of us are to work together, like on a project for like the cost savings thing, so Randy and I are working together to do that, would that constitute?
But we'll talk about that in just a minute, all right? Okay.
Can I just add one? Okay, so if we only, sometimes we have vacancies, so is the quorum calculated on how many people are actually on the board or how many people potentially are on the board?
It's how many people, to make it easy. Just, it's based off of how many people are supposed to be on the board, even if there's vacancies. Because just because someone's not attending, until their resignation is accepted by the council, they're still counted as a quorum. It really happens. So it's nine on the board.
Yeah.
So quorum's 5. And I would work on that.
However, the resignation, we had a vacancy that wasn't filled and the resignation was accepted and they're not with the person who was there. So why can't we use 7 instead?
I can track that
I've
down.
gotten a different answer from one of the other city attorneys.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
I don't have all of the information that was provided to that other assistant city attorney that was giving the information. I've had this question come up in other contexts. And unless we can confirm that there's the resignation's been accepted, and then I can look into that specific circumstance. The safest thing to do is to count off of what's there. But if it's different in here, we would have to track it down.
Thank you.
So second bullet point, public meeting applies even if you're not making a decision, if just coming together to gather information, and that information is going to relate to subsequent decisions. That includes policies that are going to guide, what are our policy statements, and those things are going to guide further decisions you make. All of those things, if you're doing that and a quorum is present, work sessions, things like that, it's a public meeting. Social gatherings, training like this, if we were just, we're doing this, I was coming in to give this talk. It would be probably not a public meeting or meetings with staff less than informed. That's why we really encourage, communications with staff, like setting the agenda, things like that, or requests for information go through staff, not each other. So it can go to staff and then they can blind carbon copy out, and then any replies that happen only to staff and not to the group as a whole. And that's because of serial meetings, and this is going to answer the question. Sorry, I don't know your
Matt.
Matt. So a serial meeting occurs when a quorum of a governing body collectively deliberating or deciding on an issue occurs in a series of meetings. And with email and forwards, that can happen very quickly. So Matt and Lois are having an email exchange, not Matt and Lois, I'm sorry, Matt and Francine are having an email conversation about what they're gonna do. They're exchanging information. And they say, well, what do you think we should do here? And they start having a conversation about that. And it's about a decision that the recommendations lab wants to make to council. Matt or Francine or both of them forward that on to just one other member of the board. So now that's an email exchange involving two of your members. It goes to one other member of the board. You're now at, each of them have sent it to one other. So now you're at 4. Second, that gets forwarded on to either there, depending on how we're going to look at quorum, or the next forward. You're talking about and you're exchanging information that's related to an issue involving the board, a recommendation you want to make. You've now created a serial meeting. You've established your quorum. You've exchanged ideas relating to the business of the lab. And you've now done that with enough members and engaged them in that and exchanged that information and ideas with enough members to constitute a quorum. You've now created a serial meeting. Remember, the exchange of ideas relating to the business of the lab is supposed to be done in public. So if 2 people are working on a project that's not a quorum, it should stay there. And then if they want to share the information with the board in the public and they want that email to be on, it should go to staff, be included in the agenda packet, so it's publicly noticed, or it should be presented as an exhibit at the meeting, however they want that email to come here. And then discussed here, not by phone, not by email, not by text. Same thing, it doesn't have to be in writing. Matt and Francine have that conversation. They each then call somebody else and say, yeah, Matt and I were talking about this. Here's what we discussed. What's your input? Next person, Lois, receives that and says, hey, just got the call from Francine. She was telling me that Matt and her did this. Have this conversation. What do you think about that? And now it keeps moving. So even though it's just one person, they're moving together a collection of ideas that have been discussed and discussing what more than just one other person has. You've now got a serial meeting.
But if that one other person's staff, does that still make it?
No, because they don't have a full.
Okay, so just hypothetically, the 2 of them have a meeting and reach out to staff for a technical question. That's okay in terms of.
Absolutely. You can reach out to all the staff you want. You can bring they can give you all the, I mean, it's like, if you.
Be careful what you wish for.
Right.
And that's why we recommend communications go through the staff. So if you're working on a project and you need information to then bring back to the board and you want to meet with multiple members of the staff who are not decision makers, do not count for quorum, you can certainly do that. And that promotes efficiency. So your subgroup or whatever of 1 or 2 or 3 are going out and collecting that information, but then they're bringing it back to the board in a quorum setting to have that conversation, not by phone, not by email, not by text, but in a public manner that's been noticed to the public so they have an opportunity to participate even if it's just a work session to deliberate on it, you're not making your final decisions about what recommendations you're gonna make to the council. That deliberation and discussion needs to happen in a public forum. Okay? And so where all of this comes out of is two cases called Dundee and Handy out of Lane County, and in there, the board of commissioners did this, and I believe it was in relationship to a lawsuit and a complaint against the city. And the board of commissioners put it on the agenda, and then they started talking about some technical aspects of some things that would affect how they would want to vote on this. And in the end, this went up to the courts, and the court said, well, wait a second, you violated the public meetings law, because even though you didn't read the decision, you guys exchanged information, boards of commissioners, that affected how you were going to vote. And that was done on the phone and the emails and not in a public forum. And so what's interesting is that they also found the liability was on the individuals, not the county board of commissioners, but the individuals engaged in that behavior were held personally responsible for their violation of the public meetings law.
So we could go to the big house.
It was money. I don't, it's not, they didn't find that criminal, so. But it's technology is wonderful. But when you're doing, easiest thing is when you're doing the work of the lab, unless you're purely just gathering information, and even that information, you know, you would not inform if you're discussing the work of the lab. Make sure you're doing it in a public meeting. Or if you're just, some of you are decided you're going to take on a project, make sure that's not a quorum. And then when you're discussing that project, the bigger whole of the board, do it in a public manner. And when in doubt, don't do it. And that's a theme that I'll come up with again in the ethics presentation as well. So moving back to the question you said, yes, there were some changes in the public meetings law. But it was more procedural. It gave individuals an ability, if they felt that there was a violation of the public meetings law, to lodge a complaint directly with a public body that they felt was violating the public meetings law, obligating the public body to then respond, either saying we agree and here's how we'll fix it, disagree and here's why we disagree. And then if the person is not satisfied with the response of the public body, to give them an opportunity to complain to the Oregon government ethics commission, which would then investigate, possibly issue its own fines, which again would be against the individual members of that public body. So more than ever, really important not to violate your public meetings law. Serial meetings and not noticing things. So questions on public meetings? All right. So talk a little bit about public records law. Public records law is found in the same chapter of the ORSs as public meetings, chapter Oregon Revised Statutes, chapter 192. It's public body, like talked about, as every governing body, municipal corporation, any board, department, commission, council, or agency thereof. Technically, this board is a public body. Public record is any writing that contains information relating to the conduct's business, the public's business of that. And it includes basically any handwriting, typewriting, recording. This recording that we do, that's a public record of that. And it has a very broad scope. So really the lessons, and so if it's public record, there are retention schedules, etc. So without going too far down into public records law, really what I want to pull out of this is the following. Consider what you're using as you're doing the work of the board or commission. Consider setting up a separate email address that you use in relationship to your work on this board or commission, so it's easy for you to identify any communications you have. If we get a public records request in relationship to something specific, they ask for any discussion or communications of board members regarding this issue or whatever. It's very easy for you to find that information by having a separate email account. And just consider that when you're doing the board's business and communicating regarding the board, you're creating a public record that may be subject to public disclosure. All right.
I have a quick one. How many years do you have to keep like your emails and the public records and all of those things?
Yeah, I don't know the retention schedules
Okay,
off the
that's
top of
fine.
my head. It varies for all different kinds of things. City reporter knows all of that. If that's a question you want answered,
I just was thinking,
yeah.
if people roll off the board, you know, how long do you have to keep it? And-
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the easiest thing to do is if you're keeping your notes together, you roll off the board, just turn them over to staff and say, here's all my notes or
Okay.
whatever from my time on the board. And they will scan it in and electronically store it in our Laserfish system and
okay.
Everything else.
send something down there. So questions on that?
No, thank you for
Sure,
answering
of
that.
course.
Could we get a city email address?
City email address? I don't,
Because your recommendation is keeping a separate email, I'm wondering if.
I don't know what the IT policy is on administering, I don't know of them doing that. I don't have an answer for that. Gmail accounts are free, so that was what I had envisioned. I don't know if they've ever issued city email accounts for people on board. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about is ethics. The policy behind the ethics laws are that public office is one that involves public trust and requires compliance with the ethics rules. The city has different ethics laws and more restrictive ethical standards than state law for elected officials or appointed officials, employees. So it's important to be aware of both the state laws as well as the city's ethical responsibilities. Excuse me. So the ethics law sort of establishes sort of the following general framework: conflicts of interest, gifts, and the use of the public office for private purposes. So we've talked about it. I won't go down this road too far, but in your capacity as a member of the library advisory board, you are a public official. And regardless of the fact that this is volunteer, that doesn't play into it. When you're in this capacity, you are a public official. So let's start with conflicts of interest. An actual conflict of interest is any action, decision, or recommendation made by a public official that would result in a financial benefit or detriment. That's state law. City code makes it any type of benefit or consequence, not just financial. So it doesn't necessarily have to benefit your financial, but it might be opportunity access or marketability of something, which then goes down to financial. But think about all the different ways that you might benefit or have a consequence for something. That's the city code's a little bit more expansive. And it's not just you, but it's also to your relatives, a business that you're associated with, public officials that you're associated as well. This is not something that I anticipate coming up as frequently with the lab. Although one area where you might see come up is if you're making decisions on using services or things like that from particular individuals, have a relationship with them, that will come up. Give you an example from another commission, the Salem Public Arts Commission. They will make some decisions about using their funds for restoration of art. So if they know somebody that's restores certain types of particular pieces of arts that are unique, and and that person is put in a bid to rehabilitate one of our bronze sculptures, they're going to want to declare that relationship and possibly refrain from voting on it because they have that relationship. So those are the kinds of things you look for in a conflict of interest. Or just the opposite, if it may, your vote, how the vote determines to have a detriment to you works just the other way. It doesn't just have to be benefit, it can be a consequence as well. Potential is basically the same thing, but in theory, it could have a benefit or a detriment to you. And again, under the city code, it's not just a financial consequence, it's any type of benefit or consequence. That would be a potential conflict of interest. So what do you do if you have a conflict of interest for an active conflict, an actual conflict? You have to publicly state the nature of that conflict and refrain from discussing or voting on it. So as early in the process as you know that a matter that the lab is considering is something that you would have an actual conflict with, you need to state it. And it's not just the voting, the discussion. You're biased, so you can't contribute to the discussion in a way that might influence other people to get to the result that you want, not just by, even though you're not voting on it. For potential, you publicly state the nature of the conflict before taking action, but you may, if you wish to, participate in the discussion and vote on the matter. That's state law. Under the city's ethical code, we have something called an appearance of impropriety rule. And that's in chapter 12, and chapter 12 is where we have our city code regarding conflicts of interest. And this is what our code says about, Salem Revised Code says about this. That we're supposed to discharge faithfully the duties of their office, regardless of personal consideration, and conduct in both their official and private affairs, their conduct should be above reproach. So if you're asking yourself, I wonder if I have a conflict of interest here, you may go down the rabbit hole of determining ultimately, well, I don't think I have an actual conflict of interest as to whether or not it would benefit me or detriment to me in theory or directly. But if you're at the point where you're asking yourself, do I have a conflict of interest or not, and you're having to do the mental gymnastics to try and justify whether or not you do or you don't, you're probably at a place where you're butting up against this, and this comes in. Like with public meetings, you're never going to run afoul by being overly cautious and overly protective and really, erring on the side of caution. You're gonna run afoul of your ethics obligations. Want to just try to, but more importantly and more likely, if you're doing those mental gymnastics and you convince yourself you don't need to worry about it when you did need to worry about it. So if you're worried about it, give yourself that gut check and ask yourself why you're having that conversation in the first place and how that plays into this school. Okay. Couple other things on our code, fair fulfillment, partial fulfillment of our duties. You need to people can't contact counselors or members of the board to gain special favor outside of public meeting. Can't use city-owned property or private use. And we can't provide any public, grant any special privilege to any citizen beyond what is available to every other citizen. This is obviously something that's going to come up more with our city council, but just want to be aware that when you're acting in the lab, things you do as the lab and in your role as a member of this board. You have to do it, treat everyone the same. Can't curry favor with a particular individual or give them favor or special treatment in your work on the lab. You cannot, without legal authority, disclose confidential city information. I don't know how much confidential information is shared with the lab. I've heard this issue coming up. I don't think you get access to employment records and things like that are confidential. But if you were being provided, legally authorized to receive confidential information, and it's known to you that it's confidential information, you can't share that with anybody who's not privy to that confidential information, including spouses, family members, partners, etc. It's you are the one receiving that information, and it's not being distributed to others. So, consequences for violating your ethical obligations: if the state violation, be a civil penalty, be forfeiture of any ill-gotten gains, and you also will have a record of engaging in unethical conduct. From the city, under our code, you could be removed from your position on the board and other potential disciplinary actions. Under our charter, it's a little bit more amorphous. The reviewing authority can act accordingly and can craft a sanction that fits the violation. So, which brings us to the next level. There's chapter 62 of the city of Salem charter. So we have our SRC 12 that kind of embodies what's in our charter. So it's really, charters are always interesting to read if you really want to research that. What? Try reading this. So this is on gifts, and it requires disclosure of certain gifts. It requires recusal if the presence of the gift or the relationship creates an appearance of bias or impropriety in the minds of others. So it's that sort of that same conflict of interest. If someone's giving you a gift, has given you a gift recently, you have that relationship, now they have something pending that the decision of the board might impact, financially or whatever. You'll need to step away from voting in that matter or deliberating in that matter, unless there's a rule of necessity, which for the lab wouldn't be the case. So just be aware of that if you have a relationship with somebody or you received a gift from somebody, you didn't have a relationship with them, and that is occurring within the context of your work with the lab, that you should probably declare that and step away from participating. So the last things I want to leave you with is compliance with the ethics law is a personal responsibility. It's your obligation to know the ethics laws and to comply with them. The government's ethics, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission is a great resource. If you have a particular thing, I wonder how they came out on that or what they feel about it. They have lots of resources and guides there. The city attorney's office client is the city, not you as individuals. So because it's an individual responsibility to comply with the ethics law, I can't give you, nor can anybody in the city attorney's office give you advice on what you can and can't do ethically. That's your own obligation to do that. And you can't rely on information you receive from my office or anybody else with the city to say, well, I thought I was doing the right thing. That's your actions when it comes to ethics are your own responsibility. We can give you guidance through the process to point you in the right direction, say like we did here, but telling you that there's state law, revised codes, as well as charter that may come into play. But ultimately, the interpretation and the action you take, you're responsible for them. If you have questions, like I said, you can go to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. They'll give you probably some informal advice. If you really have a pressing issue, not until they will give you a formal commission opinion that would give you a safe harbor, and that virtually never ever happens. Nor do I anticipate an ethical question of the Salem Public Library Advisory Board rising to the level if you're gonna go there. If you're getting the point of a commission opinion, things have really gone off the rail. And so that you're here tonight tells me that we're not gonna get there. So, for city issues, you can, if you really want a formal opinion, you can get something from our city hearings officer. But again, it's not going to protect you, or like I said, through the city attorney's office, we can guide you to where you might want to look, but ultimately it's not going to protect you. Which brings me to one last thing that I want to talk about, because as you know, we have a special election coming up in November. Said it about a gazillion times during this. You are public officials in your role on the board. There are special restrictions on public officials in relationship to elections and what you can do in relationship to ethics to elections in your capacity as public officials. So it's the Oregon Government Ethics Commission's advice that you not act in your official capacity as a public employee or a public official when participating in political activities. What constitutes engaging in political activities and where you cross the line, I'm going to direct you to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission's website on that. I can't give you legal advice because again, the ethics committee, it's your personal obligation, but the recommendation that we give, recommendation, not legal advice, is that if you're engaging in political activities, that you make it clear that you're acting in your individual capacity as a private citizen and not as a representative of the city of Salem or representative of any of our boards and commissions, which are an extension of the city. You need to make it very clear that this is you, Lois, you, Matt, your opinions, not based on your work in this capacity as an official, and that you're not representing the city in this. Okay, again, steer to the Oregon Government Ethics Committee or the state elections office if you want to get more information on what you can and can't do in your obligations. Okay. I think the next slide is no, it goes last.
Mark,
Yes.
so you can't give us advice, but if we have a question, we can ask you through, right?
As far as an ethics question,
No, like just say we have a question about like. Is this meeting public? We can ask you through Bridget, is that right?
so,
Should this meeting be public?
right, I mean,
You can't give us advice.
I-
You can give
well-
us information.
the lab is an extension of this, so I can't give you ethics advice.
Okay,
Okay, but if the lab wants to do something in particular and wants to know is that going to constitute a
Yeah.
public meeting and do we have to notice it? Then you're acting as an extension of the city. And so I can't give you individuals, but I'm your advisor to the lab.
okay.
So, but the easiest way to get that question to me is to just ask staff, and they'll. It's very rare that the question is new. I say that, but as everything evolves, but what have we just 150 years or 100 years of cities recently? Most things that have occurred have been questions that have been asked before, so staff has a lot of information with us, so it's best to start with staff and they will
Right.
forward it on to me if they have a question on that, so. When in doubt, consider it a public meeting, like unless it's, we're gonna go down and just have cocktails and we agree that it's literally gonna have nothing to do with the lab. Got it formed together, err on the side of caution. Because even if it's not your intention, the second it gets there, you've got a problem. And so, notice it, have your agenda. Even if it wants, social mixer, discussion of goals and policies, exchange of roles, functions. It's not gonna hurt yourself, right?
But also, but there are other scenarios, I mean, let's say we're in Fred Meyer's. And we just had, three of us happen to run into each other. I guess as long as we don't have a conversation about anything related to the lab. Yeah,
That wouldn't be a forum,
three.
right? 3 wouldn't be a forum.
5 is a forum.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that sounds
So
like
it's-
we were all gonna end up.
No, but okay, this is where I'm confused. So if it's
Quadruple points.
two, I thought if it was two or more, that was considered a public meeting.
Yeah.
2 or more people, is what makes a public body. A public meeting is when you have. Forum.
Okay, so it'd be fine, okay.
But if 2 people like have emails and then they send it to more, then that's one
Once
of
it
those
gets to
serial.
five, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, which
then
is,
that's the
Oh,
serial.
Again, the
okay.
easiest way is unless specifically people come together because it said, hey, here's a meeting, you said, hey, Lois, Matt, why don't you take on this issue? Get the information together, come back to us with a recommendation. That, everyone knows you're going off, go talk to the library staff or whatever. To come back and report to the group as a whole, do this. Then your understanding, short of that, if you come together, you meet each other, just resist the temptation to discuss lab business, and then you're and to say, hey, let's talk about that at the meeting.
so I guess, so if we create a subcommittee of 3 people, is that considered?
It's not a forum, it's not a public meeting, it's a subcommittee. Farm and allowing people to be present, but that subcommittee is now 3 people. They're very close to your forum, so if they start reaching out to other members of the lab, you've got a discussion with other members of the lab should happen in a public meeting. Okay?
Yep.
All right, questions?
Thank you. That's all new to me, so thank you. I'm on other boards and I've never heard most of that, so that's
Oh, wow.
interesting. Yeah,
Well, we've got Mark, so.
yes, I'm so
Yay.
grateful.
Keeps us honest.
I will not go to Fred Meyer.
If I see you there,
Right?
I'm going the other way. I'm going the other
Take
way.
offense.
Thank you very much. Okay, so, let's see, the next thing on the agenda, actually, Bridget, is about, the, request for lab people. fees
Yeah.
For some projects or some supplies.
Yeah, so, since I'm new to this, committee, I just was curious. I know I work with Kate and the foundation and they meet once a year and they kind of tell us how much money is gonna be devoted to the, for specific things. So I was just curious with the process this year, because, there's always a need for extra funds that we don't have the money for. Currently I'm looking at lab enhancement. There's been a need to have specific chairs there. We don't, currently the only chairs that we have are, private to the meeting spaces. So staff have been having to run back and forth floors to provide chairs for labs and chairs are needed for either public events or, meetings. Also those curtains are the original curtains when labs was opened, so they are over 40 years old. I got quotes for those and those are looking at $2,000 to replace. The chairs are like 2,000 if you wanted to get 10 chairs. Also we have some issues with our projector, so all of that is, just are gonna be money that we're not gonna have to fund for. So kind of looking outside to see who would be able to help us with those kind of things. Even just looking internally, the chair, I don't know if you see that chair when you walk in, it's kind of sprayed and getting really used. A lot of our furniture, even though it's only been 2 years, they get well used and they will eventually get happen. So just kind of looking and seeing what the process is and how that works.
Oh, Lois comes up with an idea.
Well, we have a process.
We do.
Francine, we run.
Well, we, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll go around here. Who's gonna answer those? We do have a process, and, for the new board members, we have funds. And I think we have about 200,000, a little over that, and this is money that in years past was donated to the library, and over a period of time, that money just collected. Now now people make donations to the foundation, so that money's not growing.
Okay.
The only amount that's growing is interest. So last fall, spring, I guess, we set up kind of a criteria for requests. And I'm sorry, I don't have that with me. Do you have it here? Okay.
And I think it's on the website.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think that, so we just, so basically anything over $5,000. We would need a tax ID number and copy of 990, obviously, from the city, that would be an issue, but really what we're looking at is that the projects that align with the priorities of the Salem Public Library strategic plan. Is this a Friends Foundation or Public Library supported project? And then how would this project expand library services and or programs? Or how would it provide innovation to the current Salem library programs or activities? And has this project been approved by the city librarian? Yeah. So that's the criteria. So, I mean, if you've got partners with the Friends and the Foundation, I think it's realistic, what they're coming to us for something, and we could take a look at that. And again, it is on the website. So,
Clarify,
It's not.
I would be the person put it on the website and never received the.
Okay. We'll get that too.
It could be any.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
So just give people a little history on what we've financed in the past year, for example. The two interns who you saw interviewed, we financed one of those from that fund. We also donated every year. The Salem Foundation runs the Everybody Reads, Salem Reads program, and comes to us with a request for funding of for $5,000, which we've done. I don't know that anybody recall any other?
The take what you need,
The
take what you need.
Take what you need at the
Take what
seed
you-
library.
Right, the seed library.
Yeah, we gave that to Tab.
To the,
Both of those, right?
And then while we were at Broadway, there was the inclusivity vestibule signage that you guys donated to.
Oh, right.
right,
And then the Willamette Heritage Project.
correct, yeah.
We have done.
Oh, and we've also funded scanners.
Oh, yeah.
We gave $10,000 towards the Salem Foundation covered 30,000 and we covered 10 for scanners so that people could, that was a need for the community had for being able to scan documents. And printers, I guess.
So that's the information you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you
Good.
so much.
Okay, so are we don't need to make like a specific decision right now on that.
No, I
just
think she.
information, okay. Okay,
Yeah,
well, listen, there's this election thing for the Salem Library Foundation liaison has been. We have got to, if there's an earthquake right now, we are doing it, no matter if we run out of here.
I need to leave in about minutes.
Okay, so, so we're gonna call for we had a nomination of, Sarah Provost Bishop for the lab liaison to the Salem Library Foundation, last month. And the nominations were closed at that time, and now we're going to have an election she will have that position. So all those in favor of Sarah being the liaison from lab to the foundation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Congratulations.
Great. Congratulations on
Exciting.
taking that role.
No, I'm really
Yes.
looking forward to it.
Yes.
Thank you,
It's
Gretchen, for letting
fun.
go of it, because
It's
I
fun.
felt badly when I brought it up. I didn't want to steal it from you.
Well, I think you'll be very important because we're trying to do this.
No, I'm really
collaboratively.
excited about us getting together in December and yeah, the
It's
collaboration.
a great. So, the next thing is my term as chair ends this meeting. I am really grateful for having done it. I was terrified to do it, but I have learned so much. But I can tell you that without the support of you all, without Dave, who's been, nudging me, and without Lois with her incredible, got everything in her box, pull it out. We have really, I feel we've had a successful year because of the teamwork. And we've managed to not get involved with the public meetings law problems. We kept it to the things between the three of us. So I want to thank you. So now we need nomination for the chair for the from now until Lois and I both. Lois terms off lab in June, this it'll be the second consecutive term for her. My term ends on lab in June, but I had a partial term, so I have like 1.5, but I don't intend to stay on beyond June, just so that you know. So start thinking about, we have 2 vacancies, and we're gonna have 2 more vacancies. So start thinking about the diversity in the community, and if you have connections to people who might be interested in the future being part of this. Okay, so the nominations for chair of lab are now open. I would like to nominate Ms. Lois Starks. And I'm chair. Can I second the nomination?
Does she accept?
I do accept,
Yeah.
only until June though.
Yeah, right. And I will second that. And then all those, okay, go ahead. You can.
You want to do a slate or you want to do each one?
Yeah, can you do a slate? Oh, a slate for the vice chair as well. You can vote on that. Oh, together. Sure. I'd like to nominate David Levy for vice chair.
A second.
All right, all those in favor of Lois for the upcoming chair and for David as the vice chair? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Excellent, and I thank you so much for sacrificing yourself.
Thank you, Francine.
Yeah.
All of you.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Francis.
Anyway. For the record, David would not want to be chair, so.
And we did a thing where it's like the coin flip, whoever the coin showed lost gets it, but she was kind enough to not put me through. I just didn't want to do it for another year. Okay, so this is really, to me, a really critical next thing, the lab meeting schedule. A year ago, there were several people who strongly felt that remote was how they had to engage. So we made a decision that meetings would be in-person meetings would be in September, January, and in May. But I would like to take this opportunity to see if we should stick with that, or if we should what you all think we should do as far as in person. I mean, usually the meetings don't go this long. That presentation always takes up a chunk of time, so usually it's an hour. So any thoughts, particularly the new members, in terms of your own time? And
I'm fine either way. I currently serve on 2 other boards and wish we met in person. There's just that camaraderie that you build and actually getting to see people, and especially for us who are new. So I would lean towards in person, but it's totally up to everybody else.
I don't have a preference.
okay, so and can we all right, so we have to vote on it. So how about if I'll just make
Yeah.
make a motion that lab meetings will now occur in person as 5:30 on all months.
So just as a
except
reminder,
and
uh,
June,
back when
July.
Kim was here, she had to get it approved through the city side first to be able to be half virtual, half. I don't know if there's any, so we can't just like, I think you'd have to check to see
So,
what will be, because she had it approved to where we had 3 a year in person, but she had that approved through the city first.
yeah, we used to meet in person every.
Correct, but
Before
because of,
COVID,
but
yeah.
because of like accessibility and whatnot, I think some of the other committees still
So
meet.
could I make a suggestion, that make an amendment to your motion pending, the library, city librarians.
I have to check.
You have to check with
my-
her.
with my
Yeah, that's fine.
supervisor.
You'll let us know, right? We
Yeah.
Advisory to you, so you'll let us know.
So can we have a vote of how many would like to have every meeting in person? Okay, all right. So, yes, okay,
Thanks, guys.
all right. So, but we don't meet in December, right?
Or July.
And July, yeah. Okay, so the next thing was the library funding. It was supposed to be ad hoc, kind of. I think we'll table that or maybe I'll table that for next time. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the flowers. We're-